If you do a word search in Google or YouTube, search for the word alpha or alpha male or alpha behavior, and you're going to get a lot of hits. In this kind of dating world, you got something called the manosphere, you got something called the red pill community. The word alpha is tossed around quite a bit. I find it funny or kind of interesting or weird that we use the term all the time, but yet we seem to be afraid to define it. So I'm going to do that for you today. I'm Paul from Apex Mindset. Take your finger, slide it over to the subscribe button, hit subscribe. Like the video if you like it, share with your friends, and let's dive in. Okay, so there's a reluctance in the scientific community and the anthropological community to define human beings as alpha or beta or on any of these social hierarchies. Okay, even though we talk about it all the time, Jordan Peterson has talked about it in his videos. Rollo Tomasi in his book Rational Male discusses it. Rollo Tomasi takes the stance that it's just a placeholder term. He doesn't want to touch defining it, in any kind of anthropological sense. And then you got a bunch of scientists that are trying to claim that it's not actually a real thing. All right. And so, well, that's funny because we know that it is. Like, we can do a deep scientific dive in a longer video. If you guys are interested, let me know in the comments. We can definitely do that, just like I did with the monogamy series. I can give you a works cited and arguments behind it, spend a little more time. But in the short video, we really don't even need to do that because look, that there are people that are genetically more dominant, right, and have more alpha inborn physical genetic traits, taller, stronger, so forth, right? Square jaws, you know what I mean? More, appear to have more testosterone, so to speak, than beta type males or beta traits. And we know that women are generally more attracted to the physically more dominant alpha traded man than the beta traded man, right? We know that there are there are mental things that are more alpha and that are stronger than there are weaker mindsets and mental things going ways of thinking. We know that there are behaviors that are generally demonstrated by a more dominant person versus a weaker beta person. Like we know that, right? So how come science doesn't want to touch it? Well, they don't want to touch it because because it violates blank slate equalism. If right now the academic community and for a long time has been trying to push this equalism, you know, this equalism value, which is that everybody is equal, and everyone is not equal. Okay, I'm not equal in. I am not 6'5". Okay, and I'm not going to school anybody on the basketball court anytime soon. That's not just because I'm not practiced in basketball. It's not like I could put all my effort into basketball and I would be just as good as, you know what I mean, Michael Jordan was in his prime. No, I'm not good at basketball, and I'm not genetically predisposed to be good at basketball. Okay, and so there is no equalism there. There are some people that are going to be genetically predisposed to being better at basketball than somebody who isn't, and we could go down the line and even including things like intelligence, and then we can go down the line in terms of things like hierarchy, social hierarchies. Okay, and that's all the alpha beta thing is, and whether omega and some of these other definitions, it's just placing people along a social hierarchy. And there are people that are genetically predisposed to fulfill certain aspects of our social structure. You know what I mean? But it makes sense because, okay, half the population being women, women are generally not going to be the alpha in an environment, okay? Because we're a patriarchal, male-driven species. Whether you like it or not, that's the truth. Okay, that's where our genetics are. Otherwise, we wouldn't be bigger. Okay, and then the other point is then if you look at 80% of males are generally not everyone can be like a genetic, the alpha, right? So that means that at least 80% or more are going to be those weaker males. So they're looking for a strategy to find their place in hierarchy. And so what's the way for a beta male or a large group of 80% of beta males to eke out their place in the hierarchy? Well, that's to tell you that things like alpha don't exist. Okay, so that's where we're at, and then that filters into the scientific community. We should have a scientific definition for social, in more of a research approach to social hierarchies, but we don't. Okay, so that's why there isn't a comfortable definition. But I'm going to give you a definition now that makes a lot of sense. All right, and I would love for more people who study this stuff for a living for them to actually take it on. They won't, so you're going to have to defer to my definition, probably. Okay, so when we look at the animal kingdom, we have the alpha of, let's say, primitive, a gorilla or chimpanzee tribe is generally a male that is in charge and is the top tier of that tribe. He has all the privileges, all the selections, usually the strongest. He's a mixture of both physical dominance and social dominance, okay? And that's what we're looking at when we look at alpha characteristics for a human being. There's a whole bunch of traits, and those are going to be alpha traits, and those are going to be both physical traits as well as behavioral traits. And those behaviors, there's a mindset that is behind those behaviors that is going to make somebody more alpha than another person. But where people get confused is that we don't exist in singular tribes. So we're not like a wolf pack, for example, where we only really interact or compete unless we're competing with an opposing pack, we're only interacting with members of our own pack. So what alpha actually is social dominance. The person who is socially dominant and leading and has all of who holds the most weight in that social circle is the alpha. So if you look at the wolf pack, the alpha male in the wolf pack has the say amongst all of the wolves in his pack. If you look at a chimpanzee tribe, the alpha male chimp has the say amongst the tribe. He is the decider. You know what I'm saying? And so then we get into, okay, human beings. So we can't define this as human beings, yet we know there's a bunch of traits, Well, it's because we, in theory, evolved from, primates. And so we have these traits, but it goes beyond that. It's because human beings, as humans, our social circles are much more complex. So what that means is that whether or not we are technically the alpha or not has to do with the context. And you've probably maybe have heard the term contextual alpha. So in other words, if I'm, showing up and I am the smartest, best engineer in my engineering group and everyone defers to me for authority and I exhibit alpha traits enough in terms of leadership where people actually listen to me, I may be the alpha male of my work group. You know what I mean? That's one social circle, all right, which is my group at work, my engineering group that I'm more or less in charge of, or even if I'm not the person appointed to be in charge, I'm the person with the most influence because of my knowledge, experience, behavior, all that stuff, right? But then take that guy, he goes home and his wife runs the show. All right. So he is not alpha in terms of the sexual marketplace, which is a whole nother circle, and he's not alpha in his family circle because he's maybe bought into social conditioning that being a weaker male is the way to success and happiness, which is not. But so he carries into the beta behaviors he's been socially conditioned in his home, even though he's the contextual alpha at work. You see what I'm saying? So every person, okay, has alpha and beta traits that they're going to, that are their kind of inborn traits. You get what you feed, however. So even you got to consider too, especially males, you're a product of the most dominant males that have survived. Only 40% of males in our history made it, okay, to create down the line to create you. So that means that 60% did not mate. So 60%, in theory, are the least dominant of our species died off. So you're a product of the top 40% every, generational line. So even the most soy boy person you run into actually has alpha traits somewhere in there, right? He's just not been feeding those traits. And so there are alpha traits. There's the traits that are of an alpha male, and I'm not going to go list all of those. That maybe another video. There's a bunch of, because you instinctually know what a lot of these traits are. You know what I mean? But there's a bunch of traits that make someone socially dominant. Okay, and then there's the context in which they show up. So in a military environment, you could have the most alpha dude in a company, for example, or let's say a platoon, who is not in charge. He's just like a specialist, but he has all of the most alpha traits. However, in that context, because of our social rules and social positions that we've artificially created, maybe we have a beta male in charge of that platoon who's the lieutenant, you see? And so the lieutenant is in charge. He's the alpha technically by position, but he doesn't have the alpha traits. The person who has the most alpha traits is maybe that specialist. And what ends up happening is that specialist who's low ranking guy ends up having this influence throughout his platoon. And probably, and maybe if he's the most dominant, if it's that clear, he has the, he'll end up executing more influence on the platoon than that lieutenant will, even though by position the lieutenant is technically the alpha, but the one with the most alpha traits happens to be that specialist. So the reason why we have trouble defining it is because we have different social circles. You have your work, you got your friends groups, you got, if you play, let's say, team sport or your jiu-jitsu gym, that's another circle. The black belt in the jiu-jitsu gym that runs the gym is the alpha of that gym, right? But you guys could go out in a social environment and he could be not socially dominant in that environment. So by skill and abilities on the mats, he's the alpha. We get into the social environment, though. He's socially awkward, maybe. He's not good at maneuvering the social climate. And maybe some mid-level or low-level guy who is not the alpha in the gym ends up being the social alpha in the social environment. You see what I'm saying? And so there are a bunch of traits, though, that you want to develop as a person and as a man. Okay, you develop these traits, and that's going to make you the alpha in any environment you go into. So there's you being an alpha because of your traits, and that's what you can work on developing, those leadership traits and that ability to have social skills, social dominance, okay? As well as physical abilities too, because that's important. All right. So having the ability to have those things. And so having dominance in various different areas of your life, that's what's going to make you alpha. So you might show up and you're not the subject matter expert in a particular circle. You know what I mean? But you are still going to be seen as that influential male. Which brings me to my last point, and this is where humans are different than animals, is that alpha males can develop alliances. All right. What do I mean by that? So when it's very easy to define alpha, beta, and omega when you're dealing with chimpanzees, because there is one social circle. That gorilla isn't going to his engineering job and then coming home to the wife and then going to the bar with the boys on a Friday. You see what I'm saying? Like, they don't have that kind of a complex social circle. So it's very easy to lay out a gorilla, a gorilla tribe and go, nah, there's the alpha, there's betas, there's omega, those guys are ostracized, there's the women, there's the hierarchy amongst the women. Like, it's very easy to figure that out when you have a one-dimensional social circle. But with human beings, though, we have multi-dimensions to our social circles, and this is why anthropology is like, I'm not touching it. But they should, but they're not, and that's why. But that being said, what was I going to say? I actually, lost my train of thought. But, in a nutshell, yeah, you want to develop alpha traits, and that's what's going to help you. And a lot of you guys who are coming to my videos, what you're wanting to have is the alpha, be the alpha in the sexual marketplace. That means women choose you. The alpha in the engineering group isn't necessarily the alpha in the sexual marketplace. He may be very socially awkward, you know what I mean, and unable to maneuver socially that well. You know what I mean? Even though he's a great leader in his work group. And so that's what you're actually looking for, all right? And so that is working when we're talking about being an alpha male in my channel or in a lot of these other topics, we're talking about being alpha in the marketplace, in the sexual marketplace, where women desire you and they drift towards you over other men, okay, that would be available to them. That's kind of what we're looking at. All right. So it is a real thing, all right. It is something we could define on an anthropological level if scientists would decide to breach this topic. Okay. Oh, alliances. That's what I was talking about before. So is alpha males can develop alliances. So in the gorilla tribe, right, there's no alliances developed. The top dude's the top dude and so on down until he loses his position. If they come into contact with another tribe, there's a fight, you know? Now with human beings, sometimes you come into contact with another tribe and there's a fight. You see it all the time, politics, right? Things of that nature. But that being said though, because we're more of a complex species, alpha males as human beings can develop alliances with other alpha males. And we see that all the time. So where alpha males, two or three, will get together and do a collaboration and do an effort or work like that. Gorillas aren't going to do that, right? But they're not a complex species. They don't even have language abilities. But with our complexity and our language abilities, I can have my own tribe of people, right? In my own circle, and I could be the alpha in that tribe. And somebody else could come along and be the alpha in their tribe and their circle. Maybe their circle's bigger than mine, but it really doesn't matter. And we can get together and we can have discussions and work together without conflict. So that's what's different with human beings is that alphas can get together and collaborate and develop alliances with agreements without necessarily following each other or falling under each other in terms of this hierarchy system. Even if one is in a position, you know, so even if the manager has been given the alpha spot based on societal rules, right? But he has alpha traits. But then there's this other guy who's a part of his work group who's an alpha himself. He's not just blindly following the leader, you see. So maybe this now, if he's a good leader, he'll see this guy for his alpha traits and he'll employ him, use him. He'll develop an alliance with him instead of trying to crush him and make him fall under the party line. He'll say, okay, well, I got this guy who's a great leader. I'm going to delegate work to him so I can use his ability and his alpha leadership ability to my advantage, you see. And then this guy down here is like, well, cool, I got a good relationship. He's not conflicting with me and using his position against me. He's instead working with me, so I'm going to work with him and help support him as the boss, you know, or whatever in this particular example of hierarchy. So that's a big difference. Whereas like gorillas, you know, there's no really alliances that happen like that. There's always somebody who's higher than another person. Whereas I don't believe it's that way with human beings because we're more complex. You can have alphas actually work together. And with human beings, alphas tend to get along actually if the values match. They tend to get along really well because they're not insecure. Insecure men and women are the ones who have trouble in relationships and getting along with each other in social situations. Whereas secure men, okay, secure women don't have that same problem. So, you know, generally speaking, a contextual alphas will recognize each other oftentimes. You know, they'll just be able to immediately recognize each other because you can recognize somebody who has those same traits. And so somebody who's a weaker, maybe not quite the stronger alpha may feel threatened, okay, and then start to define, try to want to criticize this person or whatever that happens. And that happens all the time too. Like I'll see it in leadership where you'll have a moderately alpha, let's say, NCO platoon sergeant, and some E4 comes along who's pretty alpha, and that platoon sergeant feels threatened by that E4, and he feels like he needs to, kind of smash this E4 around. That's certainly one way, but as we see in gorilla and primates, the guy who's not a benevolent leader, when he's given this position, usually loses the position eventually. He loses support from his subordinates. It's the same with humans. If this platoon sergeant is going to try to bring down this contextual alpha, ask me how I know, because I've been in this position where I'm in the lower position and people are completely threatened by my presence, and they sit there and they try to tear me and break me down to try to get me to fall in line and fall under them because they're threatened by me. But the thing is, though, that'll never work, because even if you subjugate yourself to that person, they'll never respect you now once you've done that. And so it's just a losing proposition. Well, that always backfires on that leader. Okay, I've had leaders thrown out of their positions numerous times for that kinds of behavior. Okay, and I've been the target of it before, just to get a little personal on that. So that's when you're an actual alpha with alpha traits, that's actually something you have to look out for, is other alphas and even betas in positions of hierarchy may feel threatened by you. So you have to learn social skills to kind of dial it back a little bit to let them lead. And even then, that sometimes doesn't work, because their insecurities can run so deep that they're just so threatened by your presence that they're going to try to find a ways all the time to try to subjugate you and take you down. And then in which case you just end up having to go scorched earth and they lose their spot. All right, it's just what happens. But I digress. Human beings are more complex than animals, and that is why we have difficulty defining what alpha beta is. But alpha is basically being socially dominant, okay, and physically dominant, and there's a bunch of traits that go along with that. And then that can be contextualized in any environment that you go. And because we have different social circles and different contexts, that can determine, do you know what I mean, whether you're the alpha or not when you show up at that. But if you possess all of these traits, then the chances are you're going to be alpha more, even if you're not the guy in charge and the top alpha. You're going to be higher up anyway on that hierarchy in just about any circle you go in, which is a good thing, right? That's what we strive for. And another thing too is we're talking about sexual marketplace, right? So you can be that alpha in the sexual marketplace regardless of other things in your life, for the most part. There's some bleed over, but and so when we're talking about learning how to be good with women, okay, as men being good with women, and even women learning how to be good with men, okay, we're talking about maneuvering that in the sexual marketplace, which may be different than your engineering group or your jiu-jitsu gym. You know what I'm saying? And so we're talking about that. We're talking about being the socially dominant person in that group. So maybe more questions and answers than this video, but hopefully that kind of defines it for you. Nobody wants to touch the definition, but now, what's an alpha male? Well, now you know why. Okay, it's because we have different social circles, so it's not as clean as if we were chimpanzees and only had one, social tribe to work with. But hopefully that does clear up a lot of things for you guys. You can be alpha, you can work with other alphas, you can have those traits, and that's going to help you exceed and excel in your life. Thanks for tuning in. And if you have any needs for any coaching, or if you're stuck on something, okay, send me a private message and we can set up a consultation. Till next time.